Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're looking at part 2 of the series on the AR-15 series by Colt. The first part was on the model 6000-6001 series, which was the AR-15 Sporter 1 series. Part 2 we're going to pick up on the AR-15A2 Sporter 2 and the AR-15A2 series. And then we're going to have a part 3, which is going to be the Colt Sporter series, and then the part 4 is going to be the Match Target as well as the Law Enforcement series. Now in 1984, the Colt model SPII was dropped from the catalogs. And in 1983 was the year that the U.S. military adopted the M16A2. Colt would in late 1984 or 1985 begin to implement some of the changes of the M16A2 into their AR-15 series. The first model that came out was the Colt model R6400. The Colt model R6400 was a modified Sporter 1 for all intents and purposes, which utilized the same upper and lower receiver as you had on the SP1, which was the slab side, Spiral 601 type upper and lower. No forward assist, large front pivot pin. And the changes first started off with the buttstock. They replaced the original M16A1 type buttstock with the new A2, which was a glass-filled nylon type stock with the trapdoor, of course. As you move forward, Colt replaced the pistol grip from the M16A1 to the M16A2 with the swell. And then the rest of the changes were all up in the barrel. The barrel was replaced, which was, of course, the original barrel was a 1 and 12-inch twist for the M16A1 series, M16 series, with the new M16A2 government profile barrel, which was, of course, the 20-inch government model, and it was a 1 and 7-inch twist that would handle the new M855 SS109 cartridge. Colt also replaced the slip ring with the canted delta ring, as well as the new handguards, which instead of having the left and right triangular, you had an interchangeable upper and lower. That was the first model that came out. The next model that would come out would be, in 1985, would be the model R6401, and which would be the exact same rifle as we just discussed with one change. This would be the first time that Colt would put on a rifle, a commercial rifle, the forward assist. So the evolution was the 6400 to the 6401, with the only change being the addition of the forward assist. And then the next AR-15A2 Sporter 2 would be the model R6500, which is the rifle that you see here. The R6500 is the same rifle as the 6400 and 6401, with the addition of the fire cartridge case deflector. Now this particular rifle here is rather special to me. This is the first one that I bought when I was 15 years old back in 1989. This one here appealed to me to the fact that it had the field sights. This would actually be the final rifle or final model that Colt would have the field sights on. Everything from here forward would now be the M16A2 type sights. So the R6500 was the final full-size rifle that would utilize the M16A1 style field sights. The Colt Sporter 1 model 6001, which was the carbine, would also be replaced with the model R6420. Now the R6420 would make several changes to the standard Sporter 1 carbine. Now, starting from the back, we'll look at the stock. The original 6420s would have the aluminum stock. Only the first few, and there was a very few of them that were made. Then it will be quickly replaced with the new next generation polymer stock. And then from there, you go to the receivers. Now, the 6420 went through 3 iterations or 3 changes without changing the model number. This is done sometimes when the modifications they're backwards compatible with everything prior to. So there was 3 models of 6420, and all of those changes would be on the upper receiver. The first R6420 utilized a standard slab side upper receiver where there was no forward assist. And then the generation 2 would be utilizing the forward assist, basically the M16A1 type forward assist. And then the variation 3 would be what you see here with the fire cartridge case deflector. Now the barrel would be the same as the R6001, meaning it would have a penciled sight lightweight barrel, except again, when it changed to the AR-15A2 Sporter 2 carbine, you would have the 1 and 7-inch twist barrel instead of the 1 and 12. And of course, the handguards would remain the same. They would remain the single heat shield handguards. All the AR-15A2 Sporter 2 series carbines would come to a conclusion of production in 1988. In 1985, Colt will release an additional rifle called the AR-15A2 H-Bar, model R6000. Now, the AR-15A2 H-Bar was the first rifle to release commercially that would utilize the new M16A2 upper receiver, which would mean the fully adjustable rear sights for windage and elevation. This was the first rifle. Now, this rifle here would have a very similar look to the M16A2, but it would still remain on the slab side original AR-15 lower receiver because it would still use the large front pivot pin. Now, H bar stands for heavy barrel AR, not heavy barrel. So H, heavy, B, barrel, and then AR. And it was ultra heavy barrel. It was designed for accuracy and shooting. These were chrome plated barrels. There were several models that were offered that were similar to this model. Some of them would have 1 9-inch twist barrels that were not chrome plated. But the standard and most common rifle that was manufactured back then was the AR-6000. The only modification really outside of the rear sights was the heavy barrel. Another rifle that Colt introduced in 1985 would be the Colt model R-6540 AR-15 9mm carbine. Now, the rifle that you see here was a transitional from the AR-15A2 to the Sporter series. It was still a pre-bend. It was green. But we're going to go through the different generations of the 9mm carbine as well. Now, the 9mm carbine came out of the fact that Colt was missing out on a market. There were still many SWAT teams in the U.S. There was a lot of law enforcement and military overseas who still saw a value to the 9mm submachine gun 9mm cartridge. So Colt's Hank Tatro developed the 9mm carbine, which would utilize as many of the AR-15 and original M16 parts as possible to make the logistics for repair very, very simple. So the first rifle that came out was basically the Colt Model 6001 carbine with a 9mm barrel and a 9mm bolt assembly. You had the slab side lower receiver and the slab side upper receiver. The next model, the biggest modification, would be the addition of the gas block, is what you would see right here. Now, a lot of people seem to think this is a fired cartridge case deflector. It is not. This is actually a gas block which would prevent unburnt propellant from coming back and hitting the shooter in the face, because you do have that with the 9mm cartridge, unburnt propellant coming out, which can hurt if it gets into your eyes. And then the model that you see here, which is transitional, was this one here utilized a M16A2 type lower receiver, as you can see with the magazine fence. But if you look at the front here, you'll still see the large front pivot pin. So you would also have this rifle go into the next iteration, which would be the model LE-6540, which would go into place after the ban took place, so it turned into an LE-only type rifle. In the LE model, you would see the removal of the large front pivot pin going to the standard small pin captive pin that you see today. So those were the main changes that went to the R-6540. As previously stated, in 1988, Colt discontinued the AR-15A2 Sporter II carbine series in favor of the rifle that you see here, the Colt model R-6520. The R-6520 is the AR-15A2 government carbine. As previously stated in 1988, the Colt AR-15A2 Sporter II series carbines were discontinued. The new rifle that would replace those would be the RE-6520, which would be the AR-15A2 government carbine, is what you see here. Now, the main difference is the upper receiver only. The R-6520 utilizes the M16A2 upper receiver with the rear sight fully adjustable for windage and elevation. Now, the rifle that you see here is actually the AR-6520 law enforcement model. We didn't have a green label or an original RE-6520 to show you. But basically, it's the same rifle. What the difference is with this rifle, this has been updated with the standard front pivot pin, small captive front pivot pin. You also see we have the black color in here, and this is also marked for law enforcement government use only. So this was one that was manufactured after the ban. But for all intents and purposes, this 5.8-pound carbine is the exact same rifle that was manufactured in 1988, which replaced the previous ones. Another model that was introduced in 1988 was the AR-15A2 government rifle. Now, this is also one of my personal rifles. This is one of the ones that I just recently got in my collection because I'd wanted for quite some time. This rifle here was not as popular. The original AR-15A2 H-bar was the most popular one that was sold in that time period. This one here was the exact same as the AR-15A2 H-bar with the exception of the barrel. The barrel was the government profile. This rifle here was the closest thing that the civilians could get from Colt to the M16A2 rifle. In fact, one of the Colt ads said that even the Colt inspectors had to look twice. This is the closest you could get to a U.S. government M16A2 rifle. There were some additional models that were manufactured in this time period. You had the same model that was chambered at 222 Remington for export. You can find various other models as well. The AR-15A2 series would take Colt from 1988 right up into 1990 when Colt's Industries decided they were going to pull the AR-15 from commercial sales due to government pressure. However, this was voluntary. And after that, the rifle would be coming back as the Colt Sporter series. And that will be the next video. But in this time period, there was a lot of guns that came out of Colt. There was a lot of new models that came out of Colt and a lot of things that you can't necessarily say Colt never did this. One thing we noticed throughout the Colt AR-15A2 series is you will see how there was a graduation from part to part. Is one part would become outdated, they would use up the parts in inventory, then go to the next, and then that would go on. That would follow on to many different models. As we looked at with the Colt 6420, you start off with the standard AR-15 upper receiver. Then you go to the new AR-15 upper receiver with the forward assist. And then we go to the one with the AR-15A2 with the forward assist and the fire cartridge case deflector. So you would go through that series. It was the same thing with the stocks for the 6420. You would start off with the original SPII stocks, the aluminum stocks. Those will be phased out, and now you will get into the new polymer stocks that were used right up to the introduction of the M4 with the new government stock that we see today. So there's a lot of parts that they would go through. But the thing that would not change with the AR-15A2 series was the lower receiver. The lower receiver would remain at model 601, large pin, front pivot pin up, or lower receiver, with the upper receivers that were modified from the standard small pin to the large pin to work with that lower receiver. Colt would not change that lower receiver until the introduction of the Colt Sporter series. So this will take us through the AR-15A2 series, and the next part will be on the Colt Sporter series. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, please click like, please subscribe, and even better, share.